Hello there. Welcome to episode 27 of Bow and Blade, a podcast brought to you by medievalist.net, your home for all things medieval on the internet. Bow and Blade gives you a seat at the bar as scholars of medieval warfare go beyond the Wikipedia articles to talk about the debates and the questions that we're working on today. I'm Michael Livingston, professor at the Citadel, the military college of South Carolina.
Distinguished professor now. Distinguished professor.
distinguished professor at the Citadel.
Yeah. I'm Kelly DeVries. I'm just a lowly professor at Loyola University in Maryland. Welcome, Michael. This is the first time we get to announce that distinguished position.
Yeah, it's public now. It's public now. I mean, now Kelly is going to be distinguished professor next year at the Air Force Academy. So he is distinguishable as well.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is. We are otherwise indistinguishable, but now we're distinguishable.
Yeah, as my father says, I'm alone standing in a field and getting hay fever.
And there you go.
Yeah.
And Kelly's just back from the Society for Military History Conference, which is always awesome. The SMH. We love the SMH very much. I was not able to go this year, which was tremendously sad for me. I don't know if it was sad for anybody there, but it was sad for me. You had a good time, Kelly?
I did. It's important for this because I was speaking on Bow and Blade. It was a session on podcasting, and they had invited me along, and so I gave a report on what we're doing, all the fine listeners we've got, and there were 100 for that session. Out of 700 delegates there were 100 in our session, mostly to hear about how they could start podcasts. So we encourage the competition. That's what we do.
Yeah, come on, bring it on. People want to start one. They heard this and want to do their own. I think that means they figure they can do it better.
Yeah, I think they all want to do something different. I mean, there's
probably not wrong.
There's not a lot there that say they look at us and say, "Haven't you run out of battles already?" I mean, it's the Middle Ages. Nobody fought, did they?
Yeah.
What beach did they storm? Did they have a patent? There were all sorts of weird little things that came up. But anyway, it was nice, and it was nice to see so many academic historians who were interested in podcasting. That was good, and the conference was excellent. San Diego is beautiful. Weather was nice, and the food was great.
Awesome.
Yeah, so you were missed.
Twice
I've said you were missed. So you were missed.
Yeah, well, in this panel, I think you said one of the things that was interesting is seeing how very differently these sort of things can be, and how very differently they can be run. Obviously, if it's not obvious to everyone, Kelly and I have no script whatsoever.
No script, yeah. Geez, that wouldn't be obvious to anyone. I mean, we're reading off teleprompters in the background, aren't we?
Yeah. We have no plan whatsoever for what's about to happen, and never have. So
never have. I mean, it was interesting because we've got Peter, such a great producer, and we have an editor. So one question came up, and they asked all of us, said, "So what do you do with the ums and the ahs?" And everybody said, "Oh, well, we edited them out and everything else." I said, "We just leave them in."
We speak so darn clearly that it's just fine.
It's just fine. Yeah, that and we have the old idea. Work? No, this is fun. This is a seat at the bar. They like that idea. They did like our idea of the seat at the bar.
Well, it's how it should be. And we're actually getting some young listeners too. Apparently on Twitter, we were hit up by somebody, and I don't know the person's actual name. All I know is a Twitter handle, but apparently her son, I believe it was,
her
was
eldest
her eldest son was not feeling well, and so she put some headphones on him and so he could binge Bow and Blade. So shout out to you, young man.
Shout out,
shout out. Hope you're feeling better, and you obviously have a very awesome parental unit in your life.
Absolutely.
And we're very big fans of her.
Absolutely, absolutely, and, either that or she knows we go for over an hour, so she's got an hour piece. Each episode.
I was I liked the spin I had on that. I'm
I
not
think,
sure
yeah,
about
I think
your
that's the spin. That's obviously
uh,
what's happening.
yeah,
Not
yeah, yeah,
not at
yeah,
all
yeah.
that, "Oh, I can go off and get an hour rest while I come back and then put on the next one." It's an hour
Yeah, and
plus.
these guys will blather on
No.
for a while.
Now we've
But,
had a
the reason
couple of,
they probably blather on because they don't have a bloody script. That's the
no,
problem.
that's it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've had a couple of nice, fan messages this last little bit. Uh, a young man came back with a solution in Milvian Bridge that I thought was quite interesting. I don't have it up right now, so I will, but, yeah, I can't, say I can't recall his name, but he said, "Is it possible that, that Maxentius brought the troops across the bridge as a defensive maneuver because then that they weren't using the real bridge; they were using pontoon bridges, and they could
Yeah.
get rid of them after once they were across." I said, "Well, don't think it's in any of the evidence, but it's certainly an interesting prospect." You know,
Yeah, it is. I don't. Maybe we'll talk about it on a Q and A or something like that. I'm not. It doesn't work for me, but I don't want to get into that here. I don't want to
that's
go
fine too.
off
That's
track. Because today we're gonna talk about a wild, kind of important, but also kind of
I think
in
it's a,
some ways,
I think it's,
some ways not important. We'll have to kind of
yeah, I
address
think it's
that.
of great importance. I absolutely do. What
This
are you
this
drinking?
it's a naval battle, the
That's
Battle
it.
of Sluys.
A little Slois,
So,
Slouse.
so Slouse. It depends on who's
Yeah,
talking,
yeah.
what they call this. So actually, before we get to what we're drinking, man, talk to us about why this has multiple pronunciations.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, everything in so this is takes place in modern Belgium. Well, actually, oops, I already made the mistake.
Yeah,
It's
you've already
now modern the Netherlands since
right
World War II. It was
close to
a
Belgium.
harbor at one time. We're going to talk about that, and the big harbor up in northern Flanders. So at the beginning of the Hundred Years' War, that takes over northern Flanders. Well, as we know, over the time, that area has been occupied by French speakers, German speakers, Dutch speakers, Flemish speakers, if you want to differentiate between Dutch and Flemish. And the I UIJ, which is would it be written in modern Dutch, the UIJ is a diphthong that is really difficult. In the original text, it would be UI, which isn't any easier.
No,
so so and then you have the twang of the northern Flemings. So I was always taught Slouse, and almost everybody else pronounces it as
Sluys.
Sluys. So it is the same place. Oh,
It's the same
except the
place.
French who have La Cluse.
Yeah, yeah, they go to Lecluse. We're not going to do that
No, we're
though.
not going to do that one. No.
Yeah, no.
Besides, it
Uh,
sounds like Alfred Dreyfus, back in
yeah,
Jacques, Jacques.
J'accuse. So yeah, Sluys, Slouse. It is the same place either way. And if we move between our pronunciations, it's probably because we're moving between thinking about sources and that sort of stuff.
And also
So
drinking more as the
and
podcast
also,
goes on.
uh, Sluice, we'll call it now because it's getting
Sluice, yeah,
exciting.
the sluice.
What are you drinking at the bar
This
for this
this is a hard one. I
magnificent?
mean, we could go with just a straight if I'm, going with on the French side on this one, it'd be, actually, salty water, probably.
It's what they're drinking.
Drinking salty water. Otherwise, I think I'm going with my boys Flemings up there. I'd go with a creek beer.
Oh, I'm
Sure.
drinking Creek. Come
You
on
wanna do
now.
creek? Okay, I'll do creekish creek beer. I'll do a blueberry creek beer mix or something like that.
All right, all right. Yeah. Kelly and I both love Creek beers.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So from there, not just from anywhere. And yeah, but yeah, if we're doing the other side would be a saltwater gargle.
Saltwater
Um,
gargle, that's right. I think we could have we'll have Frieten with a lot of salt. That'll do us, a
there
glass
you
of
go. There's
water
we get the
next to it.
salt. Oh,
Yeah,
freaking. Oh God.
creek beer,
I
yeah.
need to get back, man.
Got to.
Get some of that Freeton with the fresh out of the basket.
With the
Mm.
mayonnaise on the side and a little
More
Gänse stew.
mayonnaise. More mayonnaise.
Gänse stew.
Ah, good
Yeah.
stuff.
Good place to eat, by the way. Good place, that, Western Flanders. Good
Good,
place.
yeah, good place to hang out.
Right.
Period. Now, when we start talking about this, this is really the start of the Hundred Years' War. This is really kind of the
Yeah.
first big engagement. There are engagements that lead up to this,
Yeah, we'll talk about those
uh,
just a bit.
but this will be the first big one. But just kind of get your head around there at home. We're talking Hundred Years' War, um, so-called Hundred Years' War, the 116-year war, and and this is a naval battle.
Yeah.
So I think we've only done one
Um,
naval battle
yeah,
maybe
we've done
before this.
Zoncio. That's it.
Um,
I think Zoncio
that was
is,
that was it. Was Zanchio?
yeah,
Yeah. So we've
important
really only done
important
one.
battle, but this is important. Doesn't have guns, but it has a very, very important battle. And then I like the way you describe it because this is really the conflict where the two forces come together. In 13, I mean, both of them are coming off of the 1339 campaigns. The French have sailed over. I mean, some of these various ships we're going to talk about have sailed over to Southampton and done a little raiding along the coast in 1339. They captured a ship that'll be at this battle, the Christophe or Christopher, depending on how you pronounce it. And then the Edward III, in response, launches a small campaign across Cambrai, from Cambrai across, not really engaging with the French army, was falling by his side, and then leaving within a very short period of time, coming out. So this is the first one where we get both armies together. Now Philip VI is not there, but Edward is.
Yeah, Edward's there himself, and yeah, these prior years, really begin with a raid at Portsmouth, and then the kind of more famous, bigger one at Southampton. The Portsmouth's in March, Southampton's in October, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
And then there's other hits that have happening. So the first real strikes of the Hundred Years' War are actually on English coastal communities that are getting hit by these French raids. And along that time, not only to have the damage that's happening, but there's also a few little fights kind of at sea, during one of which actually Edward does not have much of a navy. There's not really
no,
much of a standing
uh,
navy, but three of his biggest ships get captured, including the Christopher Christoph. I'm going to call it the Christopher because
yeah, that's the
it
English.
was an English ship, by God.
Yeah,
Um, and
French,
yeah,
French for a
it's
few months.
French for a little bit,
Yeah,
for just a smidge, just a
we
smidge.
I think we forget that, this is the days where you don't sink vessels, you capture them. They're worth a lot. That's the biggest prize, the booty, and they in fact called them prizes, even
Yeah,
back then. So it changed hands, and they just been the ending with a different pronunciation. The French. That's it. Few months. You're right. Few months.
yeah, and it's important that we kind of get our head around, like, what is a navy
Mhm. Yeah.
at this point. So how would you characterize the um, what it is to even have a navy in the 14th century, Kelly?
Yeah, I think it's a glorified pirate fleet in many ways. That's what it is. Uh, the channel is the channel, like the Mediterranean, the Baltic as well, is rife with people who want to steal stuff, and they get it off of ships. We've got then merchant ships. These are even in the channel, merchant ships are big round ships, and they usually are accompanied by galleys. They could then chase the pirate ships off. But everybody who wasn't sailing under a flag was sailing for themselves, so they didn't stay put. This we've got a fleet. The French probably have a fleet. They probably have
Yeah,
their own ships. They also have several from Spain, from Castile. Then they have their own commanders on there, and so I don't know what you call those mercenary ships, ships for hire. The French will continue to do that. They don't really build a navy, but neither do the English until at least Henry V. So glorified pirate fleet.
Yeah, and using this not only to prey upon other prizes, but also to protect the trade
Yes,
that's moving through there, and that's of course especially important to the English, who need to protect the wool trade
wool trade. Yeah.
that is moving between the island and the ports of, in particular in this case, Flanders is going
Hmm.
to be very important.
Yeah.
Um, we should say that you look at a map today, and at the beginning Kelly was like, oh, I've already misspoken because now we got Belgium and Netherlands. That is nothing like the complication of this area
No.
in the 14th century. This area that's now Belgium, the Benelux, Belgium, Luxembourg, Netherlands, um, is an absolute patchwork when you get into the 14th century. It's a mess. Just trying to make a map of it is a nightmare fuel.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. I
really
mean,
something.
even if you look at the Flanders in the south, in the county of Flanders, can't forget this is a big county, a rich county. It's got the second and third largest cities north of the Alps, and after Paris, it's Ghent and Bruges. They're both there. They don't like each other very often, but they don't have a port. Neither of them have a port. So they use this port that's a little bit to the north, and among what we now call Middelburg was this port that came into northern western Flanders, and that was the big port for bringing in everything, including wool. You're absolutely right, because it had access to both Ghent and Bruges at that point.
Yeah. So we have this. In some sense, you could kind of call it like a choke point, right?
Yeah,
It's sort of a bit of a bottleneck for goods, materials, men, whatever you want to move through this area. And we'll mostly be talking, I think, about Flanders. That's the one we're going to be hitting. It's the
yeah,
it's the real focus point of this. But yeah, there are surrounding Flanders, just all kinds of other uh, little states,
yeah. Little states, and
little states that now make up these bigger political entities today
yeah,
in the Benelux area.
in the Benelux.
Um,
Well, in the
yeah,
Netherlands, are starting to get some population at this point, but the population is all really in Flanders and Brabant, which is right next door, and both those countries rely on wool, their cloth making trade. So they need that trade from England because the wool provided by England is their raw there. That's um, their raw material that they've got their entire economy based on, basically. So they need that wool coming through.
and when we think about uh, the other thing to think about when you're kind of looking at this area, um, trying to think about in medieval terms versus the map today, it has also changed drastically in terms of geography. So we're gonna talk about a naval battle here today.
Yeah.
Where is that naval battle today, Kelly?
Yeah, well, the first time I went to Sluys when I was writing my book. Geez, I must have been in my late 20s at the time, and I'm only 29 now. I realize, but then I was in the late 20s. I was doing some research. Went to Sluys, and I looked out where essentially I'd figured out what it was, and there was a cow, and it was not a swimming cow. It was a cow on silt on agricultural land now, very fine agricultural land. I would have been happier with 2 cows because this one stared me down for a long time. And, I thought, I don't know whether he was beef or milk or whatever, but he wasn't a ship. That's all I know. So
Yeah,
my first picture of the battlefield of Slough is a cow in the field. Yeah,
as it should be,
as it
as it should be.
yeah.
Yeah, it is miles, I think 2 miles, something like that
Yeah,
inland.
yeah, I mean, it remained active as an active port until the end of the Hundred Years' War. In fact, I've got records on guns that are being stored there well into the beginning of the 16th century. But then it silts up, and now it's nice, but it's funny because they built a land fort later on there, so you can walk around this early modern star fort built in dirt, and there's no harbor anymore. It's just because it's a trail to go up north up to the Middleburg Islands or Middleburg Zealand Islands, and yeah, this is the one battlefield we could never fight. Uh,
Yeah,
it's yeah, it's
it's
down,
it's below.
it's below there. And it's important. I mean, we wish we had it because the opening maneuvers coming in on the battle is English fleet coming in, and the French and Castilians they're all chained together next to an island across from the port. So we'll get to that, but man, it's a major it's a major necessity if we want to study the terrain of this battle, figure out how Edward was able to get the surprise because a lot of chronicles talk about he comes in under the sun, so everything's shining at the French, and it's also pretty much a surprise. They don't realize he's coming in, what force he's coming.
Yeah, and this is a really great point that that Kelly's making. Because of this, we've lost the terrain, and that's horrifying for me because I'm such an advocate of like battle is its ground, battle is its ground.
Yeah.
And here we're like, yeah, even if the battle is its water, we don't even have the water. Like
Yeah,
it's just
yeah.
it's erased.
I
And
mean,
you
I would
can do
assume
some modeling, but not much.
no, you can't do much because we don't know. There's no pictures of it. We've got pictures around the time that the Star Fort is being made, which may even be the 17th century. I have to look that up, but it would be nice because the terrain seems to take a major role in this, both at the beginning when Edward's fleet is coming in, and also at the end when the French are trying to get away, because they are going ashore against the Flemings who aren't helping them ashore. There's nobody getting taken home for dinner that night. Not on the French side, I'm afraid.
Yeah. So this is a battle where we're gonna have to use some imagination here.
Gonna have to use
And
imagination.
we're gonna be trying to
Imagine
kind of
if you will, according to Bob.
imagine if you will,
Imagine.
and trying to fill in some blanks because it really is so many blanks. Now we are rather fortunate that we have quite a few sources for this battle.
We do. And in fact, consequently, we get these really wonderful stories. So, one of the chronicles, French chronicles, tells us that Philip VI, who's back at court, that they don't know how to tell him that his fleet is sunk.
Afterwards, they don't know how to tell them
They don't know
afterwards.
how to tell him. So they tell a jester, and they literally use the word jester. It's the first time I've seen it in a source like this. And they'll say to the jester, you've got to go tell the king that he's lost the Battle of Sluys and that his fleet is essentially gone. You know? And the jester goes in and he says, well, I can't very well tell the French king straight out. So he says, sire, I was wondering if the French could dance on water. And the sire says, what? Philip VI says, what? He goes, can the French dance on water? And the response is, fool, what are you trying to say? Of course the French can't dance on water. He says, oh, because the English made us do so.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is spoiler alert, this does not go well for the French.
No, this does not go well for the French. Another one that comes out in the later century is it said there was, after this battle, for years, the fishermen were taking fish out of the harbor and they were all speaking French.
Yeah, that one's my favorite. That one's my favorite is that the fish could speak French because that's all they'd eaten.
That's all they eat. So,
Oh.
and in fact, well, the second one is the Low Countries Chronicle, but the first one is a French chronicle. I mean, they're actually spinning this story. So,
Yeah, well, there was there's no denying the reality of what happened here. And
no.
and again, we have that from multiple sources. Including from Edward himself, writing letters just in the days, right afterwards, talking about what's happened.
Yeah. He stops for days after because he hasn't seen his newly born son. His queen Philippa has stayed in the Low Countries after he came over in 1339. She's gone. She was pregnant, and I don't know whether before or during, but she chooses to stay in the Low Countries to bear the child, who is John of Ghent, although we know him as John of Gaunt.
John of Gaunt.
He was born in Ghent. So that's kind of an interesting little trivia bit about this battle too. So Edward stops in Ghent afterwards and writes back and says, "Hey, you won't believe what happened.
This went really well.
This went better than expected." Yeah.
And actually really better than expected. There were a lot of people who thought this was going to go very badly.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
the other thing that's worth kind of thinking about as well is, when we're talking about these naval forces, they, as Kelly said, are not, they're kind of coming from a lot of different sources,
Yeah.
and as a result, there's not necessarily uniformity, right? This is not like we imagine, a kind of naval force today where there's kind of uniformity between ships. That's not really the case here. We have a huge variance in the kind of ships that are involved.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And especially
we
size.
Yes, yes, and size, shape, design. A lot of these are cogs. We are very fortunate that we know, or think we know, what a cog is, because we actually have one. We actually have
We got a
two, I
couple, yeah.
think. Yeah, the most famous, or at least I don't know if it's the most famous. The one I think of the most is the one that was found in Bremen
Yeah.
in 1962 or something like that.
Fascinating ship,
The
fascinating, and it looks like it has been adapted at one point to take on, military duties. So it's a general round, as we call them, round ship, but it rises up to a certain point, and then they've got extra armor on and built in different ways. So the ship itself is built Carvel style, which is board upon board and or board resting on board going up, and at the top bits are clinker, which is overlapping board, which gives much more it's much heavier, but it gives much more protection because you've got mostly doubled wood all the way through. So that one appears, in my estimation, appears to have been adapted at one point for military service, which is what most of these are. No fleet is owned by the English. They're just going to, they may have a few ships, the royalty may have a few ships, but they muster into service anybody you can move. This is
yeah.
pretty much, you got a canoe, you might actually be in battle.
And the Bremen cog is single mast. It's from 1380, so it's a little bit later. It's 4 decades on, but probably basically like what we're looking at. And I can't remember what's the other famous one. There's another one. Somebody's gonna
Yeah,
write and
some
be
round
like,
ships.
it's this one, you idiot.
The
But yeah, it's that one's from Bremen. It's now in Bergen, isn't it?
I'm not sure. Maybe there, maybe in I think it may still be in Bremen, actually.
Oh, it is. Yeah, it's in Bremerhaven.
Yeah, Bremerhaven, yeah,
Um,
that's it.
yeah, yeah,
Which
yeah,
just means
Bremerhaven.
harbor of Bremen. So it's
Harbor of
where it
Bremen.
was found.
There it is.
Yeah, there's
The German Maritime Museum. That's where it is.
but if you look at
Uh,
the illuminations of this period, which is probably our best bet at looking at ships, at least what the artists are looking at, and they're all single-masted round ships too. But there are galleys. We know there are galleys that are protecting because they are faster. They're filled with men who can defend, which a round ship may not be. In this case, I mean, there isn't any uniformity. There is also not any uniformity in the men either.
yeah,
This is a mixture of sailors who are there normally, sailors who may have military functions, but the soldiers, they're not in armor because the moment you step off into water in armor, you don't swim well. So they're wearing whatever they can as protection, but nothing that they can't that would take them to the bottom where they'd be taken off the ship or knocked off the ship or something along those lines. Archers too. Um, this is a this is the fleet that's carrying Edward's campaign army, but it's not.
yeah.
The French don't have that. They have lots of men on there, but they're mostly soldiers and sailors that are used to being on ships.
Yeah, and it's, the other aspect of this is, you pointed to archers, crossbowmen. Um, the way these kind of naval engagements would have worked, in large part, is to kind of create a land battle at sea.
Yeah, yeah,
That this is not like now, or with with artillery and things, and trying to sink the other ship or whatever. This is mostly get close, launch ranged attacks, hopefully soften them up, board, hack them down, take the ship.
Yeah, that's it. And that kind of explains what is probably most controversial bit about the Battle of Sluys, is that the French fleet is chained together. So there's,
At the start,
you
yeah.
know, we're told around 200 ships, 200 plus ships there, and many of them now it doesn't appear the Castilians are, but the French fleet themselves are all chained together in anticipation of fighting this land battle next to the island out in the harbor. They removed themselves into the harbor, away from the port, so they know they don't have any. They're not going to get any attacks from the shore. Uh, so it's a naval battle. There's no question, but they are anticipating a land battle. Chain each other together.
And the reason they've done this is they know that Edward is en route.
Yeah.
And the idea here is, let's catch his army at sea. We'll have the bigger naval force, right, and prevent his landing. Obviously, hopefully, if it comes to a fight, we'll sink him. But as Kelly was describing, you have this kind of choke point, if you will. So this is a place where if we block this avenue in, we're good.
Yeah.
And if we chain our ships together, not only does that create kind of a blockade, but that's how we're going to fight, right? We're creating a big island of wood that's going to beat their littler island of wood.
Yeah, yeah, which is moving. So they're also anticipating that Everett's going to be moving at different rates of speed, at different have a different formation coming in. They're all prepared to fight this land battle. There's no question. I was once asked, well, why would they know that Edward's coming into this port? And I think, yeah, there's a few. I think the big thing is they know that the Flemings are his best ally, but he has an allegiance, an alliance at this point that is Flemish and Bramantese and Hindolter and Dutch and the Holy Roman Emperor. So, but the easiest access there is Slavs. They also know his wife is in Ghent. They're not going to take over the town again. It wouldn't do any good to take her anyway. So I think that they recognize that this is where Edward's going to got to be. So they brought all their fleet together, ready for a battle, and I mean, I think had they stopped Edward here, had this gone the French way, even if Edward gets away with many of his men, this might have ended the Hundred Years' War before it began.
It might well have, because at this point, Edward is already bleeding money that he can't afford, and if this goes south, can he even get creditors to give him what he needs to keep going? And especially when the ramifications that would have had on the wool trade.
Yeah.
If this goes south, I mean, that just makes him bleed money all the more. So you're absolutely right. But obviously that'll come later.
That will come later. But
In
he
the
also has
in the
big alliance. They stay together, and you're right. I mean, he's on the verge of. He hasn't already defaulted on loans to the two big families in Florence, the Pazzi and Bruzzi, and I think what is it, Pazzi and
Barduzzi,
Arbia.
I think.
Yeah. They would have, that he probably could have paid them all back, and that would have been okay, and he would have gone further. But
yeah. So here comes the fleet, the English fleet. Oh my lord, the French are in our way.
Mm-hmm.
How this next bit unfolds is really essential to what happened, what results from the battle. Yeah. And unfortunately, it's kind of hard to be sure what happened.
It is really hard.
We can kind of triangulate a hypothesis,
mm-hmm.
I guess is the best way to say this, for what happens next based on what our sources tell us.
Yeah.
Without the ground, water, whatever, it's kind of hard to say. And unlike a land battle, I mean, weather is an issue in any
Yes.
conflict,
Yes.
but at sea, it has a multiplication factor, as winds can, push ships around, currents can move things, and really have an enormous impact that isn't usually the case in a land battle. And it seems like maybe that's part of what happens next. What's your reading on on kind of what happens here uh, as the French lines appear to get disorganized as the English are approaching?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think this is a good place to stop because we really are hurting on our sources and hurting for the landscape in this case. It'd be nice to have the landscape. We're told that Edward comes in with the sun on his back, so it must not have been raining at that point. It must have been fairly bright that day. That would have caused huge amount of glare off the sea, and it
Mhm.
may have made it more difficult for the French to see what was happening. And now they feel also very much confined. So if the English are able to come in, they can do anything. They can maneuver it whatever way they want. This is where kind of this quote that Froissart writes at the end of the century is very interesting because he says, "I don't like describing battles at sea because it's a fait accompli. There's nobody gets away. There's going to be huge deaths on one side just because they they're not used to going ashore by swimming or anything along these lines. So if they're lost at sea, they're lost at sea. And so I think I have to interpret this from an English viewpoint because I think they're in control right now. And Edward does take advantage of the situation. I think he knows the French are there. He knows well enough that as soon as he sees them, he actually takes the one ship with ladies waiting and puts it behind the rest of his fleet and puts two ships with archers next to it. These are Philippa's ladies in waiting are coming. So I think he's got in mind that he's going to have to fight that day. He also realizes at that point that the French are bottled up into this and he can do pretty much what he wants. But his fleet is smaller. Is this
Yeah.
is this Edward taking another chance like he will take everywhere in his career where he goes against Goliath? He's essentially David against Goliath.
I think, at least from my part, the uh, the sun was behind us, and so that worked out great. Um, doesn't make a lick of sense because of how the sun works.
Right, right.
Um, so
Well,
this
he could have come in
the
earlier and it would have been facing him. That's the only thing.
well, the estuary runs north south.
Yeah.
Um,
So it would be I'm
so
be on his side. No
so it's
problem.
gonna be on his side. So this idea they were blinded is like, I don't know. Did people not know how the sun works? Um, like that doesn't make any sense. I mean, that would make sense for how he could approach the mouth
Yeah.
of the estuary, maybe, but then that'd mean he was tracking the coast, which would be really not smart with ships at this point to be that close to the so it'd be actually wet. That wouldn't really work either. He's coming in off the ocean. So I think that's kind of one of these. It's like we get these in battle on land, right? You
Right.
constantly get this. The sun was blinding them, and ta-da, that explains it. I think it's one of these kind of cliches.
Yeah.
So
Actually,
I don't put a
that's a point I hadn't really thought about before. That's really good. Because the sun is gonna shine. So what you want is the sun. If the sun is blocked, you've got a non-glare sea in front of you. It helps both sides. But if the sun is blocking that in between ships, having it there is to Edward's advantage because he knows the French fleet is not moving, and they can't actually see him coming at their approach if the sun is on the sea, and it's going to have to be on the sea. So just having the sun,
I mean, we don't know. We don't know what the hell the weather was. We just know that there's this
no,
the sun was behind them and blinded them. And again, I don't that doesn't make any sense to me. Just because unless the sun has changed paths since
no,
since
I'm just
then.
talking about the
Um,
glare, and
um,
yeah,
but clearly, look, clearly there's an element of surprise here, in that not so much. shock that, oh my God, they came, because we knew they were going to come. But there's a lack of preparation for what's about to happen.
Yeah.
That is that on the French side, when it hits. And I think it's probably because, as the day has gone on, they're drifting, and because they are bound together now, they're getting bound up and fouled up,
I like that.
which inevitably kind of will happen, because
Mhm.
as the constant drift is going to happen, as anybody's been on a boat at sea, and being bound together, look, is advantageous in short term, disadvantageous in long term, because now as a big unit you're kind of moving, and
Yeah.
you're getting fouled up against the shoreline, fouled up against each other. And so the French are trying to sort of disentangle themselves,
Yeah.
and Edward strikes. Now, is that a brilliant maneuvering on Edward's part to recognize that issue? Possibly.
Possibly. Yeah.
Just dumb luck? Possibly. I mean, nobody on the English side would say that.
No, no, definitely
This
not.
is all to
Not
the
on the French
glory of
side.
Edward. It
Yeah.
always will be to the glory of Edward.
Well,
But
and when you're talking about entangled, I like that term. I don't know it's ever been used with sloughs before, but if I'm assuming they're anchored as well as tied together, which means that they are literally their anchored ropes are getting tangled as the ships are moving within this, and you don't move as a single unit. They're still all separate units within this, within being tied together, and so the anchor chains, the chains that are holding them together, everything's getting some would have their masts up or their sealed up. Excuse me. They would have their
sails.
sails up,
Yeah.
and others wouldn't.
Yeah, the longer that they are kind of bound up together, the bigger their problem is going to be. And the fact that um, they don't, there's also this question about what is their intention. Are you just going to blockade, or the better idea? And one of the French commanders suggests this and is shot down.
Mhm.
The better idea is that we should sail out, so that we can get the wind rather than kind of being receiving it. Let's get the wind, and then we can just lay waste to them. We got the numbers. But he's overridden by somebody of more noble stock, as it were,
Well, that's
and
an
doesn't get
interesting
listened to.
question too, because there are three commanders on the French side. So there's the admiral of the fleet, who's is Kire,
Mhm.
and there's Behuchet, who's the constable of the army. So they're essentially equal rank. And then
Neither of which
there's
survives.
the head of the Castilian force, who really is not responsive to either of them as far as command is concerned. And he seems to be the one that puts that out. Why don't we get under? Why don't we raise our sails and catch the wind and go?
Barbavera,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
Barbavera, I think
Bavaria.
is his name.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, who's like, yeah, we can do this. But yeah, he's outranked by two folks who don't survive.
No,
Uh,
no, they don't survive. I would love to know how this dual command ever worked. In a lot of battles, you need a central commander. I think a Navy conflict, especially in the one that they've set themselves up for, they can't have two vocal entities that are equal.
no, but on the other hand, this goes back to something we talked about this in a Q&A. Communications. Even if you have a single command, how are you getting that command across to 200 and whatever ships? Is this semaphore kind of thing? We're using flags. We know that is used in some instances, right? When Henry V comes ashore at Agincourt, we know that there's flags that are used to call the council, war council to Henry's ship. So we know that there is that kind of thing that is utilized. But even so, over 200 ships or whatever, you might have to have multiple commanders, just to account for that. One way or another. I mean, the short, I guess, of it is we don't know what exactly happens. We have these bits and pieces from the sources. We know what the end result is,
Right.
but what is it in that moment that causes this kind of disorganization of the French, and they're kind of getting bound up in spot.
Yeah.
Is part of that just the size of the estuary? Is that part of the problem?
And
It's
we
so
don't
hard
even
to
have the
know.
size of the estuary.
We don't know. We don't have the map to
No.
be able to sort of mark this stuff up. Which also from my standpoint as well, I'm like, can you really fit that many ships, right? Or is this another case where the number of ships, as often the number of men in a land battle, gets exaggerated? Are the number of ships exaggerated?
Yeah.
I kind of suspect so. I'd love to know so. It'd really be nice to know the size of the water
Mhm.
to be able to
And
gauge. We
the
don't know.
depth
We
too.
don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, I think when they're talking about ships, and we got to remember, no source is an eyewitness except for Edward, and he's just writing
Edward, yeah.
letters. But no source is an eyewitness, and none of them have ever been on in a naval battle. So they're writing something that they have never seen or witnessed in their life, and they aren't there. So what they're describing, and I'll throw this out even though it's a little early. Froissart has 3 different endings. It's 3 of his different versions. He has different endings. That's what the article I was just doing the proofs on was talking about. It's the only time I found Froissart to be so inconsistent among his different redactions. But he has not seen a naval battle, and he bemoans it at the very beginning. I don't like writing about it. But he
Yeah.
writes more than John Lebel does, who just says, "Oh, grace of God."
Yeah. Jean Lebel's is super short. I got it sitting right here. I love Jean Lebel, but his account of that is a non-account.
It is.
It is something else. He's here's what he says. That the French tracked down the English between Sluys and the Isle of Kazant,
Mhm.
which is now land.
Which is,
This is the
that's
island
all one
this is
land.
the island we're talking about. So the onslaught and fighting that followed could be clearly seen from the dikes in the harbor at Sluys. So it's close. So that actually gives us kind of approximation of the distance there. So great a battle at sea had never been witnessed before, and it lasted all day from prime to vespers. The French had twice as many ships as their adversaries, including the great ship called the Christopher, which could destroy many smaller vessels. And this is the one that the French had just priorly stolen, seized, captured, however you want to
8 months
put it,
before.
from the English. And it did a bunch of damage, Jean Lebel says. If God hadn't come to their aid, they would have had no hope of resisting the French. But King Edward displayed such valor and performed such personal feats of prowess, because of course he did,
Uh-huh.
that that he cheered and that that he cheered and gave heart to all the rest. And through his prowess and that of the Earl of Derby and of Sir Walter Manny, who fought magnificently, as did a bunch of other folks whose name I don't know. I love that kind of detail. As did some other people, I'm sure. I have no idea. And principally by the grace of God.
The grace of God, yeah.
The French, Normans, Gascons, Bretons, and Genoese were finally killed, drowning and utterly defeated. Very few escaped. The English, too, suffered many losses, but they won back the mighty ship called the Christopher and a great number of other vessels. Now, of course, later sources will all say the English lost like nobody, because that's what they always say. And fully 30,000 men were either slain or drowned, so it was said. A great many of their bodies were washed up by the sea on the beaches, some of them fully armed, just as they had fought. There you go. That's what he has to
That's
say
what he has to say.
about this
I mean,
extraordinary battle.
don't you envision, though, that his first version of that actually had a parenthetical notation after Edward III, who pays my fees? Is that yeah. And this is one of the reasons. So, Froissart, who at this period of time, Jean Froissart, writing the end of the century, but at this period of time is copying everything Jean Lebel says, essentially, except here. And then he goes off on his own in 3 different versions, one that
Yeah.
focuses on the English as the cause of victory, one that focuses on the French as the cause of defeat, and one that focuses on the Flemings on shore, which
Yeah.
is just a nice, colorful thing. And that was the Flemings have been coming up from Bruges and elsewhere during the day. They've arrived in little skiffs. They've walked. They've ridden. He talks about all sorts of things they've ridden, and they sit on the side. They have this alliance. Their economy is relying upon the English, and all the French that come on the shore are killed
Yeah.
immediately.
They welcome them.
They
Welcome to
backed up
Flanders.
by the Low Countries, contemporary Low Country sources, including this weird Bramantese poem called "Van den Derden Edward," on King Edward III, which is a paean beyond anything an Englishman could have written. So
It's pretty amazing.
it's amazing.
It takes it to 11, as
Takes it
one
to
might
11,
say.
it does. And the Flemings are evidently taking taking the French to 6 feet under,
To take it to 6 feet under. Yeah,
if they
yeah.
bury him at all.
They're welcome to Flanders. Have a sword in your belly. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it is a lot, as Kelly said at the start, a lot of French die here. Because when and what do you attribute that to? Do you attribute that to their disorganization here at the start? Is it the fact that the English longbow is already kind of proving
Mhm.
its worth, as many say, well, it can shoot further than the crossbows, so as the English are approaching, they're able to lay down more damage to enable them to get on board the ship, and and kind of leverage that chaos. Um, are the English ships a little bit more maneuverable here, and that maneuverability is what does it.
Yeah. That's it.
God,
And it's, the English longbow is very interesting because this is I think if there is anything, it's not the distance, not the range. I think it's the accuracy. So crossbow has no accuracy. It's gonna jolt out of your shoulder and go everywhere, but the English longbowmen are well trained and have been since they were young to shoot at butts and to shoot at, a fronting, and so they've got better accuracy, and there's no question that they're very influential in this. Surprisingly, none of the sources, though, give them the credit that they will later on for land battles.
yeah.
So,
If I actually think if it's the bow that makes such an impact, literal. I actually think it's the arc.
yes, yes,
Because a crossbow is more or less, you know
it's flat arc.
yeah, you can arc it, but this is a weapon you tend to fire very flatly, whereas the longbow arches over, and this enables you to get the guys on the deck
Mhm.
who are behind railing. That I think that's the clincher there to me. But as Kelly said, nope, nobody really
No, the
says
only thing
that.
that's
Nope.
said is, there's a few of them, and then Froissart follows this up, and they say that they are shooting their bows from the deck and from the mast, and from the crow's nest. So it appears that what has happened is we know how large these numbers are, far more archers than there would be crossbowmen on the French fleet, and they've gone into the mast, and so they're shooting down from the height, and there's nobody who can reach them. Um,
Yeah. And yeah, the end result of this is hours, if we're to be believed, hours of killing. And because of the situation here, where the French are in this kind of bound in area, um, there's nowhere to go.
Nowhere to go.
There's really nowhere to go. I mean, you can go ashore, but like the people that are on shore are not welcoming you in the way you want.
Yeah.
And in front of you, you've got the English fleet, and of course, again, you've got which direction is the wind,
Mhm.
where is the tide rolling. All of these factors um, sort of combine to push them and keep them in a confined area where it's just
Yeah.
killing upon killing upon killing upon killing. It's awful,
Now
awful
Bavaria
business.
does get about 35 ships out. We don't know if they're all the Castilians or whatever, but he
Not a
seems
high
to be able to
percentage.
yeah. he seems to be able to slip the very narrow access to the open ocean, and we don't know what time. It must have been pretty late in the battle, and so nobody calls him a coward. He's just simply getting his fleet back. He won't work for the French again, though.
Why would you? You
No,
know,
exactly.
why would you? Well, he's in charge of galleys, and those are far more maneuverable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he is.
They're not as beholden to the wind as a cog is, and that sort of thing. So they can get out. It is, the people on the shoreline are cheering this. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
it's horrible to imagine what this must have been like.
Yeah,
Uh,
Darren Edwards says that there's basically no room on the shore that is not got a Flemish a Flemish person cheering on this defeat of the French.
yeah, that they say, and they just say the water is just bodies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, would it have really been close enough? Probably. It just would have been awful, and you can imagine the men going, if they tried to jump in the water to try and get ashore. Not only are they fighting, the currents and the weight of whatever they've got on, they're also fighting to get through the bodies, right? They have to fight through that horror to try and get, and even if you got through all that, then you get to shoreline and there's a bunch of people that are waiting to kill you. Awful business. Philippe, we couldn't dance on water.
No,
That's
we
bad.
tried, though the English managed to do so.
The English managed to do so. There are orders. Barbavera he is ordered. He is arrested for desertion and is kept in prison, I think, for a year or something like that. What we kind of talked at the beginning. What does this battle mean?
Yeah.
And you said, well, in a kind of against the facts, if this had gone the other way, the 100 Years' War goes very differently.
Yeah.
Obviously, it doesn't. It goes the way it goes, and we get the 100 Years' War continuing for more than a century after this.
Yeah.
We get Crécy in 1346. Lots of things happen, but
most immediately,
what's really won here?
well, nothing really. When it comes down to it, I think it strengthens the alliance, especially with the Flemings. But by the way, Flemings don't have a count at this point. They are in rebellion. Jacob von Artevelde, the Ghent.
Well, they have a count. They just don't. They kicked him out.
So that, but I don't know that would have been weakened had the French won. It might have if they had taken revenge against the Flemings in some way. And the French were always willing to take revenge against the Flemings for anything at this point.
Yeah.
But Edward tries to monopolize on this, and he goes to besiege the most northern French allied town, very important town of Tournai, and sets out there with his entire alliance together, and they besiege Tournai, and that turns out to be not good. It's not successful.
Yeah, does not go well. And this is interesting. Sluys is often said to have established sort of control of the English Channel for the English. This sort of stuff. That's not true.
No, that's not true. And in fact, one of the things that's really telling is later on, after the Siege of Calais is successful, and it says, "Oh, we'll have a better chance against the Norman pirates then." And you go, "Well, did take care of them in 1340 by capturing 100 and some odd ships of theirs, 160 ships? You did not take care of the Norman pirates. They're still out there. They're still having fun at the English fleet's behest. That's a sad statement to make." So it's there are some, and I saw short book on Battle of Sluys once, and they called it, the like giving England the reign over the seas. And you go, yeah, yeah,
Not really.
nice hyperbole there.
Not really. Yeah, it is. It's a weird thing because it's so important. Had it gone the other way, things would be so differently. Having gone the way that it did, I mean,
It didn't do that much.
it didn't do that much. I mean, which is horrifying given the thousands that die here. That well, it didn't really change that much. So it's one of these odd battles that are both incredibly important and also sort of not.
Sort of.
And so you're left with this like, well, do I make a big deal about this or don't I think the contrary to fact kind of thing on this one though is so huge, as you said. If this goes the other way, can the 100 Years' War even continue? Can Edward afford it? Are his allies going to be able to be behind him? Man, so much gets really rough really quick. I mean, especially because Edward III is there,
Mhm.
right? There's a chance if this goes the other way, Edward III don't make it out. Like that could be
Well,
huge.
and that's it. Even though Edward goes out of Tournai is going to defeat his alliance. He'll never have the alliance again. So at the end of 1340, he has gotten no gains whatsoever. He's gone back home to chew out the Parliament, which I guess you could look at as an important thing, because in 1341 he completely dismantles Parliament, and he's not going to be searching for money anytime soon. But yeah, there's not really much that comes out of this. Now, had he defeated Siege of Tournai, and we're going to have to deal with the Siege of Tournai because that is a really fascinating engagement in its own right. We'll do that later. Had he defeated and taken Tournai and held the alliance, then the 100 Years' War is very different.
Yeah.
So Tournai's defeat is more important than Sluys's victory for Edward.
Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
A very good way of thinking about it. Yeah, what do you wish we had for this battle?
Well, there's a lot of different things. I mean, we do have the one thing I will say, just for anybody out there who wants to know more about this battle, read the Low Country sources. They're the best. They're the contemporary ones. There's some written in Flemish or Bramontese, but a lot of them in Latin, and they're all contemporary. So the sources are good. I don't know.
And Kelly, you have a wonderful article on this.
Yeah, well, that's
Uh,
coming out on. Yeah, I do have an article on the different sources. As
on
far as,
medieval ships and warfare, I think is the book.
geez, I gotta remember that one.
I think that's it.
Yeah,
God, leadership, Flemings, and archery.
yeah, leadership,
Uh,
Flemings, and archery, different contemporary accounts of the
yeah,
Battle of Sluys. Yeah, and
yeah,
that, uh, I mean, those sources are really strong. So normally we're at this point, we go, oh, we wish we had a source. I don't know that an eyewitness would even help us here as much. Of course, the terrain. I'd love to
yeah.
know this,
That's it.
and I think I would really like to know what made up this fleet. And we got 213 ships accordingly on the French side, 120 and 150 on the English side, but they're not the same sizes. They're not even the same type of ships, as you point out. Well, Bavaria has galleys that you get out with. So I would love to know what types of ships they were and exactly how the French expected the chaining these ships together would benefit them.
Yeah. I want the bloody map. And that actually could be achievable. What is kind of cool about where science is going, landscape archaeology, is that you could recover this, right? You could use core sampling.
Yeah.
It would take a concerted effort, but I think with core sampling, you could basically plot out the necessary information to
Yeah.
get a sense of what this is like here, and that would be, I think that'd be huge for enabling us to get a sense of how this important event happened, because
Yeah.
without it, we're just left with so many question marks. but with it, we could model a lot of what's happening, and I think that'd be incredibly informative because it's one of these where we have a pretty good sense of where it is on the globe. We just need to get a sense of what that place was like.
Yeah, yeah.
It could be done.
And then, there are some things like the fleets that went down and the ships went down. There weren't a large number. They were taken as prizes, but
Yeah,
they went down outside of the regular channel. So the harbor still operates for the next 200 years, 150 years without having, without having any records of these ships being brought up or taken apart to allow ships to come in. So it'd be nice to be able to have you know, ground penetrating radar that would go deep enough to see what was down underneath, and that might help us out. See some of the remains and what the French are, what the French and English are using at that point for weapons, and because we don't have a lot of knowledge of naval conflicts at this point.
yeah, yeah, man. It'd be so many unknowns,
Yeah.
so many unknowns, and this like what are the Kel was talking about earlier, like what are these guys wearing on ship? I mean,
Mhm.
you don't want to have armor because if you go in the water, you're going to go under. On the other hand, you're getting pummeled with arrows or whatever it is. You want to have armor.
You sure
Uh,
want to
you're
have
ultimately you're ultimately going to be fighting, melee on deck one way or another. You want to be armored. Our imagery of artwork has always got everybody armored.
right? But it's
So
mail, and mail is heavy. Mail will take you straight down because you can't get it off easily.
yeah. So what are they wearing?
Yeah,
Like these are things that as you're hearing, we're kind of working through trying to triangulate answers because we don't always have clarity. It's
yeah,
part of the reason we love what we do, I think.
yeah. Creek
But
Creek
also
Bear is
we're like,
helping, by the way.
I'd love to have more info.
Yeah,
Uh,
I would too.
yeah,
Very important, to recognize how important this conflict is, but it would be so nice to know how it was fought and how it was,
yeah,
completed. Even though the sources are telling us that some of the French are coming ashore armed, they don't tell us they're coming armored. They're just
yeah.
they've just
Key
got their
difference.
arms. So I mean, the Flemings are said to have had all these tools and implements, farm implements, and their own little rudimentary weaponry for Flemish farmers to have, and they're putting to death these Frenchmen
And
quite easily.
they're on hard ground. You come
Uh,
stumbling out of the water exhausted.
yeah.
Gonna get a
I
pitchfork in
I
the
did
belly.
ask the cow. He gave me no information one way or
Did he
another.
speak French?
He was closer to the battlefield than I was, so I thought he might
Yeah,
have
that's
seen
true.
something.
That's true.
Yeah, I think
Well, I think they're starting to lock the doors on us, man.
they know we have no answers, so
They're like, yeah, they're in the drink. I need a rim shot on that.
in the
Ching.
drink. Oh, I was
Yeah,
slow. I was slow to
you're
them.
slow, man. You gotta
Oh,
keep
man.
up. Keep up.
Well, as as I did have one student, who wrote about the Battle of Lepanto, that it was groundbreaking. The Battle of Sluys was groundbreaking.
Groundbreaking. Yeah, false. False. It was a wave of disaster.
Wave of
Um,
disaster, yeah.
so before we get too carried
Oh,
away with
oh,
with
geez.
puns, this has been episode 2027. My
Oh,
goodness. So
congratulations, my friend.
we really hope y'all will join us next time for episode 28, when we're going to be talking about Roncesvalles Pass
Yeah,
and 778, the Song of Roland fame. Get out your French literature textbooks, folks. It's gonna be good times.
yeah. The Big Chuck, his army, the only defeat
Good.
we know of.
Chuck the Great.
Yeah,
Chuck the Great.
Chuck the Great.
Charles Lemay.
Yeah.
So
Tournament,
please do join us for that.
absolutely.
And as ever, a reminder: this podcast is sponsored by medievalist.net. So the best way to support us, other than buying our individual books, of course, is to join their Patreon at patreon.com/medievalists. That's also the absolute best place to drop us a line if you have a question for our Q&As, the next one of which will be episode 30. So
Yeah,
not that far
absolutely.
away. So
Absolutely.
please do give those in. Thank you for listening. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers. Another creek.